My name is Penny Kipranu. I'm the Festivals and Events Officer for the City of Yarra. I'd like to begin by saying that Yarra City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people as the traditional owners and true sovereigns of the land now known as Yarra. We also acknowledge the significant contributions made by other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to life in Yarra. We pay our respects to elders from all nations here today and to their elders past, present and future. So thanks to everybody for joining this session, which is presented by us, the City of Yarra, with support from the Boîte. And we have Eyal, who's the Managing Director of the Boîte, supporting us initially. So thank you very much for your help getting us off the ground today.
My pleasure.
We appreciate the support. You know, the last minute, it's a changing landscape, as we know. So all of
the last minute is just another minute now.
It is. It's much appreciated. So today's session is designed to try and answer some key questions that our creative community may have about federal and state assistance for small businesses, sole traders and individuals, as well as navigating some legalities around rent and leases. I'd also like to mention as a positive outcome that City of Yarra last week announced $185,000 in grants to support creative businesses and creative communities during the COVID-19 situation. So this is part of a broader $7.46 million package of immediate financial assistance for medium-term support for our community. So more info is available at arts.yarracity.gov.au. So head there for guidelines and deadlines and all the information. So today we have two presenters. So we've got Darren Sanicki from Sanicki Lawyers and Kavisha Kuruk from Whitesky. Essentially we'll start the session with Kavisha talking a little bit about her area and, you know, some of the issues that are coming up, you know, in your space, Kavisha, and then we'll move on to Darren. So we encourage people, there's a Q&A box, so I'll be keeping a check on questions coming in, and if you'd like to ask the question live, we'll turn you on so that you can actually answer that question. If you just want to type your question in, I'll then relay that to Kavisha or Darren, you know, as intended. So yeah, I'd like to first introduce Kavisha, who's partner and senior business manager at Whitesky Accounting. Hope that's right, Kavisha?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I'll head over to you.
Thanks, Penny. Thanks for the introduction. And hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I know it's a very uncertain time, so it's good to all stick together and try and help each other out. So for those that don't know what Whitesky do, we're an accounting firm that we mainly work with music and entertainment industry and creative industries predominantly. So a lot of you guys may have heard of us, and if you haven't, now you have. So we look after things like bookkeeping, tax, royalty accounting, tour accounting, and all things, pretty much all things accounting and tax. So as you guys would have seen, there's been so many announcements over the past few weeks from both federal and state governments. So I'll try and fill you in on the key things that have been announced. There's obviously a lot to most of them, and I'm sure you've got plenty of questions. So I'll try and get to as many as possible, but there will be things that I don't cover, certain grants and that sort of thing. So I do encourage you guys to do as much reading as possible online. You know, websites like business.gov.au, Victorian state government, that business page is really handy. Centrelink, of course, and ATO websites. Actually, Whitesky, we've got a section on our website under the About section that covers some of the key points. So if you have time, if you could pop over there and have a bit of a look. And it is best to speak to an accountant as well about your individual circumstances to get the most out of what's being offered. But yeah, do your own research where you can as well. So I'll start with the ATO, sort of they're granting payment relief. So I'll start off with those bits. So they've announced, the ATO have got a range of payment relief measures at the moment. So pretty much this is the most relaxed they've ever been, of course, because it's such a bad time for everybody in terms of trying to get things paid. So payment deferrals of up to 6 months for tax payments. A lot of low interest payment plans are being offered too, which is so great. And they're not penalising people for varying tax instalments. So those of you that have got tax instalments as a sole trader, you are able to vary those down at the moment. They're also remitting interest and penalties. So I guess the thing to keep in mind with this is that you still want to make sure you're keeping up to date with your lodgements. It's also the payment side that they're being lenient with. So just something to keep in mind. So if you do have any tax returns or BAS returns outstanding, you need to get those done. I'll move on to the bank help being offered. So each of your banks will be offering their own customer support packages for individuals and businesses as well. Things like repayment relief for home loans, and they're also offering unsecured loans. So it's definitely worth inquiring with your chosen bank, and there's lots of info available online as well. Okay, so I'll go into a few grants. I think these are probably the two main ones that I've seen that I think would apply to you guys. So the Australian Council for the Arts is offering a resilience fund. So that's just purely for the arts sector. And they've broken it down into 3 different streams. There's survive, adapt, and create. So as those would suggest, survive is to pretty much offset or recoup any money that you've lost due to cancelled activity. Adapt is pretty much being able to adapt your arts practices and explore new ways of working during this time. And then create is so that you can continue to create and be artistic and do those things that you normally do while income is down. So with those 3 things, each of them have got different eligibility requirements and that sort of thing. So just visit the Australian Council website to get across all of that info. There's a pretty helpful frequently asked questions page, so you can have a look at that and maybe see if you're eligible under one of those. And you can apply for all 3, but only once. Yeah, so there's a few different things like that, but I'd encourage you to have a look. And then the other one is the Victorian government have got a business support fund grant, which, so this one is actually for people that employ people. So if you've got payroll and you're paying for people, paying wages for people, this is a 10K grant that is paid through from the Victorian government. So you need to be earning more than 75,000 to qualify as another eligibility test. So if you're registered for GST and you have employees, this could be a good one for you. That information's available on the Victorian government website. And then another support for businesses that have employees is the cash flow boost, which is through the ATO. And this one is an interesting one because essentially you're getting credits on your BAS statement when you lodge wages and you're withholding tax on behalf of your employees. It's a max of 50K and a minimum of 10. So that's a pretty big amount. And it doesn't matter if the withholding amount is less, you get the difference as a credit. If you have any specific questions about that one, just let me know afterwards. I can try and explain to you individually. And then, of course, the JobKeeper update, which I think will be the most interesting one to all of you. And since being released, We've been waiting on further clarification on how this one would work, and we've finally seen some answers this week. So I'll try and fill you in on that. So for employers, there's a test that's required to show a decline in turnover of 30%. So just taking a step back, the JobKeeper is the one that's not through the Centrelink system. It's where you apply for it with the ATO, and it's the $1,500 a fortnight payment that's made for employees. But just to clarify that, because I think people are getting a bit confused between JobKeeper and Job Seeker. So Job Seeker is through Centrelink. This is the other one. Okay, so the test, the 30% downfall test. So this is pretty much, you need to prove that compared to, let's, for example, say April this year, your income has dropped by 30% comparing it to April last year. Now, the eligibility dates started from March, so it could be you're comparing March to March last year, and also you can use the June quarter compared to June quarter last year. Now, the issue that we see, especially with creatives, is that income is often fluctuating. So you might have had a big spike, even like right before all of this happened, you may have had a really big spike. And so how do you show that sort of as an even plane if you were just receiving, you know, a normal stream of income that's regular? So that alternative test hasn't really been announced yet. They've just said that they will have something that will sort of help out to even that fluctuating income. Yeah, I wish I had more info on that. Unfortunately, I don't, but it seems that there will be more info available very soon. And also there are businesses that are brand new this year that didn't even exist last year. So how do businesses show a downturn if they didn't even exist last year? So that's another one that will be part of that test. So I would recommend just staying tuned for this info, and in the meantime, just still register your interest and make sure you've put your name down as being interested to receive the JobKeeper. What else should I mention? Okay, so for employers, so people that have people on payroll, you need to still make sure that you're paying them at least $1,500 a fortnight, because this is a retrospective amount that you receive. It's pretty much a reimbursement. So if you haven't been paying your employees, then you want to make sure by the end of April that you have paid them at least $1,500 a fortnight for the last 2 fortnights. And you can do that in one lump sum, but it just needs to be before the end of April. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, I think there was one specific question about this that came through from someone to do with being a sole trader and applying for JobKeeper. So I'll just read out that question. Penny, is that all good?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
That's the one.
So the question was, I'm an artist with an ABN and 2 casual jobs. Currently stood down from one of my jobs and reduced hours with another. Neither will be eligible for JobKeeper as far as I understand. I usually earn very little through my ABN, a few $100s a quarter, 0 at the moment. So definitely meeting the 30% fall criteria. Will I be eligible to apply for JobKeeper as a sole trader, even though it's obvious from the figures that I earn most of my income elsewhere? So just to be clear on this, if you're an employee of a company, a separate company, the employee status always takes priority. But in this case, because this person is a casual, then you can choose to apply as a sole trader. So casuals can still, I guess it's one of those things where, because casual jobs it's not a certain amount of money coming through, they've said that we'll still allow you to apply as a sole trader. So I guess that's good news for anyone that is in that situation. But yeah, just keep in mind, if you have a full-time or a part-time job, you'd always need to go to your employer first. Yeah, hopefully that answers that question. But that's pretty much all I had sort of prepared. But yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah. No, thank you, Kavisha. And like I said before, if anybody has questions, at this point, and would like to, sorry about that. Technology is amazing. If anybody has questions, you can use the raise your hand function or type a question in the Q&A box, and then I'll be able to kind of bring you in. You can answer question live, or I can just then relay the question to the panelists. So if there's anything there, if we can have a look at that. I've just lost this connection for a sec, sorry. Here we go. Okay, so I've got a few questions here, so I'll just take it from the top. Let's have a look, answer live. Okay, so I've got a question here. Which will be addressed to you, Kavisha. I've got conflicting advice on whether two directors can receive the JobKeeper. We're both employees of the business.
Yes, so it's my understanding that if you're on payroll and being paid as an employee, that as your employee status would mean that you're eligible for JobKeeper. It's when, because certain companies, they're not paying directors through payroll is when there's an issue. I think we would need to look at the full picture to make a proper assessment, but that's my understanding at this stage. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. That was from V. Does that answer your question, V?
Cool. Great.
Yes, great. Beautiful. And then I have another one. So I have some exhibitions cancelled later in the year. So how can I justify loss of income when I have not made any yet?
Oh, interesting. So I think this one would fall under that alternative test I was talking about for when people, are only receiving money at a certain time of the year. So I would sort of hang out and wait to see what those tests would entail. I would imagine that you would be able to prove that, that is your income for the year and I'm not going to receive that. So therefore, it's a lot of unknown at the moment. I wish I had the answer for you, but I think we'd have to wait and see with that one.
Did you want to ask anything further on that? That was from Jane. Just wait and see. And again, if people would like to sort of come in and ask the question themselves, you can let us know when you're typing in your question. We'll bring you in live if you'd prefer to answer.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear your voices.
Yeah, so let's have a look. Okay, so Jane's saying that that was answered, which is great.
Thanks, Jane.
I've got so one from Alison. Let's see if Alison agrees, would you like to come in and just ask your question live? Let's have a look. Yep, so Alison is a sure, so let's just bring Alison in. I'll just find Alison. Yep, go ahead, Alison.
Hi.
Hi, Alison.
Hi. Thanks. Just some people I know have been told to register now for a MyGov ID. Should we be doing that in preparation?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
So the application for JobKeeper, it starts on Monday. So if you're able to get onto that today, there's just a few ID requirements that you need, just like 2 forms of ID. And then, yeah, just keep in mind, this is, I think people have MyGov as well. So this is separate to MyGov. MyGov ID will give you access to the business portal, which is a slightly separate thing. So yeah, definitely do that. That's a great question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
There's another one here from Meredith, so I'll just bring her across. Okay, go ahead, Meredith.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi.
Meredith with a heavy cold.
Hello, Meredith.
And Graham.
Hello, nice to meet you.
We're a not-for-profit incorporated association. So I guess we don't fit into too many boxes easily.
Yes.
We exist simply so that the artists can share the cost of leasing the building. So basically our only income is money people pay that we then pay to the landlord.
Okay. So you're wondering if there's any assistance available there. Rental assistance, I would imagine this would fall under the Centrelink banner, which I haven't really talked about because it's not really my specialty.
Right.
Individually, I would imagine that they would be able to get some kind of rental assistance. I don't know, Darren, if you are able to touch on, I guess, getting rental reductions.
Yeah, so yeah, perhaps when I do my my little talk, I can address the issue with I guess being a tenant. I mean, I understand you're
Yes.
a tenant and you're a tenant and a landlord at the same time. So I'm happy to touch on that when I sort of chat in more detail about it.
Cool.
Good, thank you.
Thanks.
And we have another question from Jane, actually. So let's just get Jane in.
Yes.
Hi, Jane.
Hi, hello.
Hey.
Yeah, I wondered about the actual job application form. You know, how detailed is it? How much time will it take to fill it in?
Yeah,
Do we allow for 1 day or 3?
Yeah, these are the questions I've been asking too, because we haven't actually even seen the application and we won't see it until Monday, which is why I guess it's important to, as Alison suggested, for everyone to register for MyGov ID.
Yep.
You can also go through, if you have a tax agent already or you work with a BAS agent, you can go through them to get help with doing the application. But if you're doing it yourself, yeah, it's one of those things we'll have to just wait and see, and it'll be a bit more clearer on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah, I imagine there'd be certain documents to submit. So it might not be...
Without even seeing them, my accountant, I asked for an estimate of what it would take for him to do it. And he said, oh, I reckon about 500. And I thought, oh my God, here we go.
Well,
I'm sorry, you're an accountant.
well, I probably wouldn't have quoted yet, not till Monday. But
yeah.
I mean, it might be worth that much. I think the value of the application is probably where that number comes from. But in terms of hours, it's hard to say. Yeah, it's really hard to say. Sorry, I'm not able to answer that.
No, that's okay. I understand. Thanks for taking my question.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. So I can't see any other questions that have come up at this stage for Kavisha. Oh no, sorry, I've got one more. And this person would just like me to ask you this question.
Sure.
So how will this payment change job seeker?
Yeah, it's one of those things, it's either one or the other. You can't do both. So if you're already on job seeker, I would imagine if you wanted to apply for JobKeeper, you would have to let Centrelink know that, because JobKeeper, you would get there's a few different scenarios. So there's if you're still an employee of a business, if you're a sole trader, if you're an employee that has been stood down. So for you to, if you're currently a job seeker, I would imagine you are not currently employed, or you've had a reduced amount of income. So you would want your employer to pretty much rehire you so that this job keeper payment can come through you. So it's essentially you get to stay on the books even if you're not working. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. It's one or the other.
Great, thank you. We actually have a couple more. So,
oh, great.
Yeah, this is good. So there's Kath. I'll just allow you to talk, Kath. Go ahead.
Hi, I was just wondering, in terms of proving the drop in turnover, even though we don't know what that form is going to look like on Monday, what sort of things could we prepare for? And do you know, for example, will they be measuring a BAS against a BAS or a, like,
yeah.
I'm wondering about how I can get ahead of Monday.
Yeah, so I guess just to clarify the tests, so there is that one test that, the one I mentioned about comparing 1 month this year to 1 month last year. So that is pretty clear that we can compare BASs and we can compare tax return income, or I think the BAS will be the one that we would go with. The alternate test is that one that we're not sure if you've got really fluctuating income, how you would show it. So yeah, if you're already getting BASs done, I think you're all set. You'd be able to very easily prove that the cash that you've got in this month is less than the cash that you received last year. Yeah, so have those BASs handy.
Thanks, Kavisha. And actually just back to that person who was asking about how the payment will change job seeker, there was just a further clarification needed.
Yeah.
Just saying, I'm a sole trader working in photography and have applied for Centrelink.
Yes, so as a sole trader, you can apply for JobKeeper now. So I would get in touch with Centrelink and just let them know that you're thinking of, but I think before we sort of pull the pin on job seeker, you'd want to wait and see that you actually do qualify for JobKeeper. And then that's sort of when you would say to Centrelink, I'm no longer going to be receiving job seeker because I'm now receiving JobKeeper.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
And there is a question from Anna. So go ahead, Anna.
Oh, hi, Anna.
Hey.
Hi. We know each other.
Yeah. My question, hang on, my baby fell over. My question is, so is the are the JobKeeper payments going to be reassessed every month or fortnightly? So for example, if I get to mix an album in June, will I not get the JobKeeper for a month?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you only need to qualify once, which is pretty amazing.
Great.
So if you qualify, the earliest period that you qualify, so in March, if you qualified, then that's it. We don't have to reassess.
Okay. So they're not going to, in September, say, oh, you earned too much, you have to now pay back the JobKeeper for these certain months?
Not to my knowledge, no. So hopefully that doesn't change, but that's my understanding is you only need to qualify once.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay.
And Kavisha, you're popular.
Yay.
Let me just, Jane wanted a little bit more information as well. So I will just get Jane to come in and...
Oh yeah, that's a great question, Jane.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep asking questions.
No, that's a really good one. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I have one casual who currently makes less than $1,500 per fortnight, but will he still be eligible for the $1,500? Do I continue to pay him the normal amount for now, or do I have to increase it to $1,500 to justify getting the $1,500?
Do you need to pay the $1,500? I believe so. Yes. So you need to show that yeah, I know it's a bit of a weird one, but you need to show that you have paid that $1,500 to qualify.
And just for one fortnight, date or two, or like?
Well, it depends if you, like, do you normally pay fortnightly?
Normally pay fortnightly, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is up to you. You don't have to, you would only qualify for the payments you're making is pretty much the answer to that. So if you only want to pay one fortnight and you don't pay the following fortnight, you'd still qualify for that first fortnight that you paid for.
No, but
yeah.
I mean, do I actually increase it to $1,500 for one of these fortnights now to become eligible for the full amount for him?
So you do need to top it up, but you don't need to pay super on the extra. There's like a very specific, I'd love to talk to you after this just so that I can get my head around exactly how your situation works.
Sure.
And I'll give you a straighter answer than this. But yeah, my understanding is that there is that top-up payment required.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And there was also a question from Jackie. Jackie, do you want to raise your hand if you'd like to ask that question now? Or I can just bring you in, actually. Let's do that. Go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hi, Jackie.
Hello, Kavisha. Yeah, so I heard that so you can keep the JobKeeper payments, that every month you have to submit like a profit and loss. Is that
every month?
Yeah, every month, because it's a monthly payment.
I'm not sure of the backing that's required. I haven't seen that. Where did you read that online?
It's probably, yeah, probably something like that. And I think it was about a week ago.
Okay. Because the new information came out this week from the ATO about the tests. So there will be, I believe that you will have to show the payments coming out. So there'll be some sort of, whether it's a bank statement or some sort of proof that you will need to provide. The P&L, I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I don't have that information. But when I do find out more, I'm happy to reach out to you and let you know.
Okay, can I ask another question?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm a sole trader. I'm a visual artist, and just like sometimes I get, you know, like an amount of money, but that's, if I was to declare that at that time, it's sort of, I have to even it up over the year with my incoming costs. So I don't know what I'm trying to ask. I think sometimes it's hard to give an estimate. Yes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so this is where that alternative test that I keep talking about will come into play. They haven't said exactly how that will be able to be proved. So I would just hang out another week and just wait and see what they say about that. But in the meantime, I would still apply and wait, you know, get my Gov ID and get all of that ready. And then hopefully we'll know more even by Monday when the application actually comes out. But the aim of that is so that we can show that your income has been evened out over the year, especially when it fluctuates.
Does that answer that question for you, Jackie?
It's still so vague. I wish I had straighter answers on all of this, but I think we'll know a lot more next week.
Yeah, don't we all? Great. Well, if there's nothing else for Kavisha, I mean, maybe things will pop up as we continue, but
yeah, like even after this session, happy to chat to people.
Yeah, we'll share those contact details with everybody that registered as well, even if you, missed those links as we've been talking.
Yeah.
So, Kavisha, thank you so much. That's been so helpful. I think you've answered a lot of questions for people at this stage anyway, even though things will keep shifting. So I'd just like to bring in and introduce Darren Sanicki from Sanicki Lawyers. Darren, thanks. I know you've been speaking a fair bit about commercial leases and and other legal, you know, implications sort of currently around the realm of COVID-19. So yeah, thanks for joining us today.
No worries. Thanks, Penny. Thanks for having me, and welcome everybody. Excuse me, I'm going to have my head down a little bit as I'm kind of reading from notes spread all around my desk. I hope that you know, this applies to a number of the people listening, and as I said, I'm happy to answer any questions as we go along, or at the end, or even like Kavisha said, if people need to have a chat after, I'm happy to do that as well. So I've been speaking a little bit over the last couple of weeks because, as you can appreciate, especially around the city of Yarra, there are many, many, many businesses, venues, bars, as I said, band venues, restaurants, etc., that are all have their doors closed at the moment, and of course are all being expected to some extent to pay their rent, as well as outgoings, which of course when you're not trading is not something that is really possible at the moment. So a little bit like as Kavisha said, with some of the new laws and regulations that have come out, there's still it's still a little bit vague, but I'm sure that people that have seen the news over the past week or so are aware that the federal government brought out what they're calling a mandatory code for commercial tenancies, which then is going to need to be, I guess, ratified or turned into legislation at the state level, because it is state legislation that regulates residential tenancies. And so I understand that that's going to come into law. They're Parliament sitting next week, so you know, they're doing things pretty quickly these days. So you'd expect within a week or so that this will become into law. But nevertheless, from our experiences, and at least you know, given that people sort of pay their rents monthly, people are sort of getting on the front foot, both landlords and tenants, to work out what they're going to do during this situation. So there's basically this code that I'm talking about has brought out a number of what they're calling leasing principles, which now apply to commercial leases. So I'm going to I'm just going to go through them broadly and in not too much detail. It's important to note that, you know, that a lot of this, because there's no two leases are the same, no two lease terms are the same. There are a number of terms and conditions within leases that differentiate them for each other. So this is a little bit of a one-size-fits-all, but by necessity, it also involves negotiation. I can give you tips about how some of our clients, I've been giving advice this morning to a particular client on how to go about it. I'm a tenant as well, so I understand the concerns that people have. But essentially, as a starting position, in order for the code to apply, you do need to remain committed to the terms of your lease. So I had a really interesting situation yesterday where there's leases where a client's lease is up for renewal, and she's sort of going back and relying on this to basically negotiate a new lease. Now, this code to negotiate a new lease. Now, while someone might be able to do that effectively, if you have a lease that ends, let's say, during the period of COVID-19, and you don't exercise, and it's got, let's say, an option for you to continue, and you don't exercise that option, then effectively you're a little bit stateless in a way, because you don't have a lease anymore, and then accordingly this isn't going to apply. So the general thing is you do need to have, the principle is you do need to have a lease that's on foot. And apart from these principles in regards, which basically concern rent and the payment of rent, but in the absence of that, you need to agree to be committed to all the other terms of your lease. So in a nutshell, I think we've heard this. Look, effectively what they're saying is that businesses under a commercial lease are entitled during the period of COVID-19 and a reasonable period after, which they're calling a recovery period, which of course is undefined. But for a reasonable period of time after, during the term of your lease, commercial tenants are entitled to a reduction pretty much equal to the reduction that their business has suffered, okay, or the decrease in their business. So you know, Kavisha mentioned, you know, some of the problems that are going to occur in trying to calculate that, and no two businesses are going to be the same in that regard. But as a general principle, if your business has dropped 50% in terms of its takings or revenues or profits, again, not really defined, but we'll just say your business has dropped 50%, then you're entitled to approach your landlord and ask for a 50% reduction in your rent, which they are obliged to give you. Important to know so it's a proportionate reduction, but whilst you are entitled to that 50% reduction, and this is probably the important bit, and it's not capped at 50%, that's the starting point. But it is important to know that reduction that you receive is basically half consistent, considering a waiver, which basically means you don't have to pay it, and half is going to be considered a deferral, which means that you owe it to your landlord to be paid at a later point in time. Now, when that point in time is dependent on when this current period ends and a reasonable time after. So you have a 50% reduction in rent, 25% of that is going to be a waive, you don't have to pay, and 25% of that is going to be a deferral payable over a period of not less than 24 months, commencing from the end of this. So the end is undefined at the moment, but when social restrictions are lifted and business is back on track, now it'll be a gradual. It won't be an absolute. But in any event, you'll then have 2 years from that point to make those repayments for the deferred portion of the reduction that you've received. I hope that makes sense. Now, we've been dealing a lot with venues and you know, restaurants and things like that, and there's a lot of businesses obviously that are closed. So their business has not just dropped 50%, it's dropped 100%, but that doesn't matter. They will receive that 100% reduction in rent, meaning this period when they're closed, they won't have to pay rent, and then once they're back trading, half of what they've received in terms of that reduction benefit is going to have to be repaid to a landlord over a period of time. Now, obviously, a lot of people or a lot of tenants are nervous about that, because it effectively means that once they are back up and trading, there is going to be an increase on their rents, because that money does have to be paid back over a period of time. So, and that's where it probably gets a little bit more technical, because we don't have legislation yet to sort of read from on a detailed basis, but it does talk about here, and I'm looking down at my notes, that the deferral portion may even constitute greater, you know, than that 50%, where if it doesn't, it would actually cause a business to potentially, you know, be compromised and go under. So there is still some room for scope under that. But that is that's a starting point. Then there also is an obligation. So then everything sort of sits in and around that. Their outgoings, however, are still payable. So people are wondering what the situation is with their outgoings. However, to the extent that any landlord receives any benefit or reduction in their outgoings, they are then obliged to pass that on to a tenant. A lot of this is also reliant on some sort of transparency between a landlord and tenant. So if a landlord would come to you and say, look, I'm not in a position to give you all of this or any more, etc., due to my commitments, just like they're entitled to say to you, well, we want to see your books to ascertain, your reduction in business. Under this, as it's written to this point, you're also entitled to ask to see their books. So, for example, this is definitely about, not about anybody gaining any windfalls, and the landlord may have been able to negotiate something with their bank, let's say, or they may not even have a mortgage, in which case, providing hardship would be a little bit harder for them to prove. It's not to say, people live off rental income, so I get that. But there is that obligation for each side to be transparent with each other. Now, during this period of time, there's no interest paid, so that's a good thing to know. So even on the deferred amount that you eventually have to repay, there is no interest payable on that. Important for all tenants to know that are in a tough predicament at the moment, which is nearly all tenants, that you can't be kicked out for a period of 6 months for non-payment of rent. So even if you do fall behind in your rent, you can't be kicked out of the premises for a period of 6 months. So that's obviously good. The other thing is that there is a freeze on increases. So during this period, if your lease is coming to the end of a year and it says that at that point, there's meant to be a 5%, 3% increase in your rent or CPI, whatever it is, that has to be waived for the period of COVID-19, for the period of the lockdown, and then for a reasonable period after. And they're calling it a recovery period. It's obviously undefined, but I guess, taken at its ordinary meaning, it would mean until such time as the business gets sort of back on its feet. That's generally how it's going to work. I know we've got a lot of clients that are in negotiations with landlords, because it's still, even though you've got these sort of blanket rules or guidelines that we're all meant to be sticking to or adhering to, there is still plenty of room for negotiation. And one of the other things here, and I think this is a good one, so if I can give some advice, one of the things that you're entitled to do, so let's say this, let's talk about a period of 6 months, the COVID-19 period of 6 months where we're all out of action, let's say, and we're going to get that reduction in the rent. What we're entitled to do, though, is that for this equivalent period of time, we're entitled, and by we I mean a tenant is entitled to request a increase on the current term of their lease equivalent to this time frame. So there's a lot of advantages in that, let's say, to a landlord. So what it is the landlord saying, well, all right, I'm giving you a 50% reduction right now, half of that you owe me. And then you want to start negotiate from there and say, well, look, I really don't want to be indebted to you for this extra money because it's going to mean a rent increase. How about we add on 6 months to the end of my lease for the current term? Now, whilst that is not, the landlord will say, well, I'm still, out of pocket because, you only paid me half the rent for 6 months. There's actually a lot of advantage in them for accepting a longer lease term. They've got some certainty. They avoid the cost of having to relet their premises and all the costs associated with, cleaning a place up and having it ready and getting in a new tenant, giving a rent-free period and all of that. And it also gives you more time to get back on your feet. And if you've then got an option, you can move on together. So I think a lot of this is about working together. People are suffering hardships to different extents. Obviously, the arts and entertainment industry is probably one of the, together with travel and a few others though, and hospitality is one of the ones that are really suffering. And I think it's the opportune time to basically go to a landlord and say, well, look, this is what my business has suffered. I want an equivalent reduction in my rents, and I'm happy to talk about moving forward how we can sort of work together so that I guess the the idea is, and this is across the whole community, is sharing the burden. So that's what this is designed to do. But I think that, you know, as someone who's a tenant as well in premises, and I think, you know, this code, together with some of the, you know, some of the entitlements that we're going to get under JobKeeper and some of the programs that Kavisha has been talking about, does go some way to I guess, easing what is definitely a painful period for most people over the next few months. Maybe I'll stop there and take questions.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, so people can use the raise hand function, which should be at the bottom of the window. So if anybody wants to ask a question that way, they can. Alternatively, you can use the Q&A box as well. So just give.
I can see we've got the question from before, which was I think it was Graham using Meredith's profile, who's a not-for-profit. Now my understanding is that this applies equally for not-for-profit, so that is not of consequence in this situation. The artists, and I know because I've dealt with clients like this, so they've got a situation where artists share costs of leasing a building, so the artists pay rent, and then the not-for-profit then has a landlord who they're obligated to pay rent to. So I reckon that's I suppose a clear-cut, in a way, situation of a tenant being the not-for-profit being actually able to demonstrate their losses. And I'm aware where I am too, there's tenants and there's subtenants and things. And so on the basis that, let's say that the artists who share the cost of leasing this building are coming to you and saying, look, we need a bit of a rental break at the moment because business has stopped. And let's say they're only able to pay 50% or 25%. Well, whatever their position is going to be equal to your reduction in business, given that you're effectively a landlord relying on rental income to pay your own rent. So you'd advise the tenant, and this is the situation, you'd be able to prove it pretty easily, because they'd be able to see what, you know, if they asked you to, then you'd be able to show, you know, what rent was coming in compared to what rent, you know, from your subtenants is coming in now. So you'd be entitled to that equal reduction in rent from your landlord. And again, the issue is then that half of that is going to become a waiver and half of it is going to become a deferral. So you're still going to be up for half of that. So you'd need to have that conversation, obviously, with the landlord, negotiate the best outcome you can. Now, my experience too, my limited experience with this, because it's only all new, I mean, people aren't that interested, especially at a smaller level, of going through everybody else's books. Okay, nobody wants to go through other people's bank statements and their profit and losses and their expenses. Like, nobody wants to do that. Everybody wants to strike a deal. So, you know, you'd be going to your landlord and saying, well, look, this is the, you know, the issue that my tenants are having, or our licensees, or whatever it is, effectively your business. This is the extent business is suffering. I need you to match that, but we need to talk about this deferred payment, because that's going to cause some undue stress on us. Or you'd need to have the conversation with your artist and saying, look, once we're up and going again in 6 months' time, are you prepared to, you know, you might have to pay a little bit more. You know, there might have to be a slight rent increase because there's going to be some deferrals that I owe back to the landlord. So that's going to be subject to negotiation, if that helps answer that question.
There's one there from Jane as well. So Jane, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Darren. I have a landlord who's given us a pro forma form to fill in just last week about how our business is reduced in sales, etc. Should I do that, fill in the form, or negotiate with them more one-to-one in a more personal way?
Well, I haven't seen the form, so I presume there are, like, I don't know what they're asking you. Are they asking you how your business has suffered? Like, what sort of
question? They're, you know, it's like fill in the boxes with figures here and there. I just don't want to be committed to something legal, you know, if I fill in a form that if I actually get it wrong or could have, asked for something more without realising?
Yeah, look, the very short answer is, there's probably two halves to that answer. One, there's nothing that obliges you to complete any form that you've been sent, so there's no law that says you have to fill out a form. So there's nothing forcing you to do that, but at the same time, the landlord probably is entitled to a lot of the information that they're asking you about. And I say that without having seen the form, but if they're asking you questions about how your business is suffering and etc., so that helps them make an informed decision about what they're going to offer you. Then the information, whether you say, look, I'd request, let's say you say, look, you know what, I'd rather request a meeting with the landlord. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. And a landlord wouldn't really be able to object on the basis that you haven't completed their pro forma. Now there is, and I didn't mention this, and it's important, and it's sort of implied, but it's certainly been brought to the front during these times in regards to this code, is there is an obligation for the parties to negotiate in good faith. So, as long as you show a willingness to engage in good faith discussions, then, you've done the right thing. And there is provision where, and this is important as well, where despite everybody's best efforts, you just can't reach agreements with your landlord in terms of the reductions or the benefits being offered to you, then there is provision for binding mediation.
Okay.
So that'll be a last resort. So I think the answer is, if you're not comfortable with the form at this stage and you've got your reasons why, and you say it's very early, and we're all in the same situation. Like it's very hard. This has only been going. We're only 4 weeks in. So how are we meant to be? And especially a lot of businesses that operate on a lag. So there's a lot of businesses whose March and April is quite strong. More maybe perhaps in the service industry because of work that came in December and January. So it's really June and July that's going to hit them all. And I should say, and this is following on from what Kavisha was saying in terms of how we ascertain the reduction in business. So it's not just going to be, well, here we stand today, and it's a little bit, the principles that they're using for JobKeeper, which is to say, well, yeah, we're okay right now, but April, May are going to be terrible. We're going to drop 60, 70%. That's allowed to be taken into consideration, obviously, in having these discussions, as opposed to where we are right now on the 17th of April.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have seen one of those forms, Darren, and they're pretty, they ask very specific questions and ask you to provide bank statements and that sort of thing. So what Jane was talking about, yeah, those application forms are pretty intense.
Yeah, there is. Look, I understand why they're doing it. I understand why landlords are doing it, because there's, if we take on face value that people are acting in good faith, okay, so if people are trying to take advantage of the situation and then it sort of screws it up for everybody. And I suppose from a landlord's perspective, where they do have their own mortgages and their own obligations, they want to make sure that tenants aren't just taking the piss. We all want a rent reduction anyway. And they want to make sure that people aren't just saying, hey, our business has suffered, and so they're, whether there's overreach and overstretch, possibly, and I get it. But if you are, but let's also be fair, I guess, in a way, and that is if the information you're providing is confidential. I understand that a lot of people are not willing to hand over their financials because it arguably puts a landlord in a stronger position, let's say, when the time for renegotiating the rent comes around. So I get that. But there's also an obligation. It works both ways. So we're allowed to say, where a landlord sort of tries to say, well, I can't give you all of this because of my obligations. You're entitled to ask them for information as well. And I think, frankly, there's no way they'd give it to you. So you might find yourself in a little bit of a stalemate in that regard, and you've got to pursue with negotiations. Don't just take everything that they're saying at face value. You've got to pursue with negotiations until you reach an outcome. And if you can't, well, then this mediation is actually an option. And I can understand a lot of businesses not wanting to provide their bank statements to their landlord. But at the same time, a landlord does have a right to sort of have verified, you know, what the reduction in your business actually is.
Sorry about that. There's no other questions popping up at the moment, unless anybody has one that they haven't had a chance to either type in or raise their hand yet. So maybe just in the meantime, there was one which I don't think we answered from V. V, I think you're still online. So if you wanted to just jump in and ask that, which I think was probably related to Kavisha's points earlier.
Thanks, Penny. Just checking, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. I think my question was to Kavisha that basically from last week we've bumped up, this pay cycle we've bumped up our employees, all who weren't getting the 750 gross to 750. Should we have done that for the week before as well, given that we paid weekly, or is that enough for now? Sorry, Kavisha, I think your mic's on mute.
Oh, let's.
Whoopsie, thanks for that. That's a really great question. Yeah, so if you do want to qualify for both fortnights, yes, you would need to top up both fortnights to 1,500. So I think I mentioned earlier, you can still, if you didn't do it, you can still do it as long as it happens before the end of April.
Okay, so basically, so the pay cycle that for the working week, 12th April to today, essentially, we've everyone's
so
on 750. Should we do that for last week as well?
Yeah, so the JobKeeper pay cycle starts from 30th of March.
Mm-hmm.
So 30th of March was the first one, and then we're currently in the second fortnight, ending 26th of April.
Yep.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks for that question.
No worries.
Kavisha. There was nothing else for you, Darren, unfortunately. I think most people's questions are probably related to
JobKeeper's that's everyone wants to hear about it. I have just shared, hopefully everyone got that, just a link to our website, and it's specifically about the JobKeeper update. I encourage everyone to read through that, especially if I wasn't able to answer your questions kind of very in detail. Have a look at it. Hopefully that's helpful.
Great. And what I'll do as well is I'll gather some of those links as well from both of you, and hopefully because people have subscribed to this particular webinar, I can just reply to everybody with those helpful links. Maybe I know you mentioned, Darren and Kavisha, that you were happy for people to possibly email you as well. So Kavisha, what's the best email address for people to?
Yeah, sure. Should I type it in the chat? Is that easiest?
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I've put mine there.
Great. So for those that maybe aren't using the chat, or they're not across the technology at the moment. So Darren's is Darren, R, at Sanicki Lawyers, SANICKI lawyers.com.au. And for Kavisha, it's info@whitesky.com.au. So just checking on another question here. That was from Jane about the email address, which, I've just shared. So that was info@whitesky.com.au. We're sort of coming up to just after 11 o'clock. We had allowed another sort of half an hour, depending on, how long we thought people would like to chat for. So I think at this stage, yeah, these webinars are very much a work in progress, and we think that there's, you know, some really great resources out in the community that we can access, and people like Kavisha and Darren and Eyal as well from the Boîte, which are, you know, putting in a lot of effort to share their knowledge with people. So we'd love to hear what you thought. So yeah, please get in touch. My email address was on the first bit of information that went out to people. So yeah, if you'd like to share some comments, good, bad, and we'll also be posting further webinars onto our website, which is arts.yarracity.vic.gov.au, and you can subscribe to our newsletters there as well. And also, if you're not following us, please do on Instagram, which is Yarra City Arts, and we're also sharing content as widely as possible from other organisations. So if you have something that you think we should be sharing with everybody in the community, please send it through to us. So yeah, Darren and Kavisha, if there's nothing else that you would like to sort of end with that you've sort of just thought of, yeah, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Penny.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Penny.
Yes.
There's a hand up.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, there's a hand up.
Oh, there's a hand up. Jackie.
I think that's a mistake. I'm very sorry.
Oh.
But thanks so
You
much.
just wanted to say bye.
I just wanted to say, yeah, the hand was meant to be waving.
Ah, thanks, Jackie.
Okay. Yeah.
Great. And Eyal, maybe while we've got you here as well, just quickly, do you want to talk about what you've got up and coming in your fabulous world?
Oh, sure. And thank you for the invitation. And I'm really happy that we were able to support this. It seems like there's so much that has disappeared from the world that we're really working hard to make sure that it appears again in some form or another. So, well, I don't know if everybody's familiar with the work of the Boîte. I'll put a link to our website on the chat. We're a music organization based in the Abbotsford Convent. Our offices are at the Abbotsford Convent, but we normally have a program of maybe 60 to 80 yearly concerts in about 20 venues around Victoria, which got wiped very suddenly over about 3 days at the start of March, and our immediate response came in the form of a neatly packaged slogan: "Adapt, not cancel." And since then, we've been doing everything we can, assembling all the ingenuity and all the connections and all the ideas that we could to continue offering shows. And we're doing it in one way or another. We've had to adapt and then readapt and then readapt the adaptation. But we've put on 6 shows to date, including a couple of ticketed shows. And we run a weekly hangout for musicians, fundamentally for musicians. Anybody's welcome, but the topics that we cover are relevant to musicians. And we are really stressing this idea to the creatives that we work with, to the artists, that in a way we should approach the present situation with all the changes that it entails as a continuation of our work. So suddenly putting all your work for free on the web is not necessarily what you need to be doing, and in fact it could be dangerous in the long run because you'll get your audiences used to so what we're doing is we are putting on concerts and inviting the audiences, much like we did a month ago. And we did reduce the price of the tickets, and in a way you can buy 1 ticket and the whole family watches the show because it happens on a computer, which is fine. These are the parameters of the model, but I really want to encourage everyone to think of your work as you used to, as you have for as long as you've been an artist, and continue trying to ingeniously and creatively find ways to continue working publicly, despite the fact that you have to do it digitally.
It's really great. And people can have a look at what's coming up from your website.
Yep, I put the link
yeah.
on the chat, and every Thursday at 3 o'clock, we run this session called Disconnected, and as opposed to Disconnected. And if you go onto the Boîte's website, there'll be a link there, and it's a Zoom meeting that we invite somebody to talk about a relevant topic. We had Whitesky last week talk about relief packages. We had Harmonic Whale Studios yesterday talking about home recording, and we have a long list of topics, including online streaming, teaching, music teaching online, what choirs can do to continue practicing, low latency jam technology, etc. Many things.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of sharing going on at the moment. So that's sort of one positive that I think is coming out of all of this. People are sort of really willing to kind of share what they know and what they're learning along the way. So yeah, thanks again, everyone. And yeah, have a great weekend, and we'll see you for the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thanks, Penny.
Bye.